Okay. 7 o'clock, we will call the January 14th Police Services Board meeting to order. And I have a confirmation of the agenda. North Huron Police Services Board hereby accept the agenda for January 14th Police Services Board meeting as presented. Rick moves. It's gonna be easy. Jim seconds. All those in favor? Carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? There is none noted. We have the minutes to the previous meeting from December the 17th. The board member that wants to move those minutes as presented. Rick will move those. Do I have a seconder? Jim seconds. Any questions? Any questions or comments to those minutes?
No, I don't.
All those in favor? Carried. There's no delegations. There's no business arising from those minutes. So we'll move on to 7.1, which is the Detachment Commander's Report. Inspector Rob Sweat, go ahead. Or Dave, whichever one's going to present.
Dave.
Yeah, I could start.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. I'm sure you've seen that we've updated the format of the report. So this is, we had spoken to this in the past and kind of brought this across from Perth County where Inspector Scott's utilizing it there. So have some more information and I'll go through that with you. So
Well, if I could just interrupt for a sec, Dave. Like I say, I think it'll help us capture some of the proactive things that officers are doing, and it gives us a sense to kind of gauge that as we go and make adjustments. So, like I say, this is kind of rudimentary. Like the information is accurate within, but we'll continue to kind of mine it down a little better and look to where we need to maybe improve upon. If you don't mind, Dave, I'll just speak to.
sure, absolutely.
You see the calls for service at the top. That obviously we have nothing to compare it to, but that's our calls for service as reported. So during this period of time, 139. Number of cruiser patrol hours was 112 hours. Foot patrol hours was scored at 750, and that's an area that we're going to try and through officer education, just kind of improve upon what we get. Sometimes the weather's not conducive to the calls. School patrol hours as well is at 3. Again, I think some of this too is just with that education component, we're going to message this to the officers, say this is what we report on, so this is why we need to score this properly, so continue to push forward on that. When you look at specialized patrol hours, that would be things like snowmobile, ATV, those various things if we did do that. Focus patrol hours. Now this says nil. I think we do have one still ongoing up here. We have one ongoing right now, and Dave will speak to that in a bit. But that'll give a sense of what our efforts are like, how many hours. Now that could be 2 or 3 hours at an intersection, but that could be 15 minutes at a time during a peak time. So it doesn't have to be a lot of hours, but at least showing that that's a proactive, certainly driven to a community focused concern, like we had at the school there, right? Our mobilization hours, that's something again that will start speaking to as the report that we provided to you in relation to mental health grant and all those various things. That will include hours from our community service officer, our mobilization mental health officer, our school officer, some of those things. So that's what we hope to see, and I know here it is an education piece, and we are kind of reformatting that unit as we go. The dust has settled a little bit, so we're moving forward with that. And ride, and certainly we're going to start to report on our auxiliary hours, which I think is very important. If you look at the CKNX fill a cruiser or fill a trailer, I apologize, I just forget what it was. Those hours are free hours that the municipality and the community sees, and it's dedicated volunteer hours. So, and they represent us, the organization, and the communities that they live in. So I think that's important moving forward. So that kind of speaks to some of that proactive time when we spoke about the hours before. You've got your calls for service, some proactive hours coming out of that. And then when we get to that report at the end that we've kind of bounced back and forth to land on, hopefully where we need to be, those obligated duty hours, that's where we'll kind of get a sense of what the service value is until it goes to Municipal Policing Bureau, as I explained in the last meeting. So I'll let Dave speak to the rest of the
Certainly.
report here as we go through, and then we'll kind of speak again more so to the community here with some intertwining from a county perspective, because I think it's important to know a little bit about the county perspective because of everybody travels in and through and around all our municipalities throughout the county. So Dave, will let you go from there.
Certainly. So with this new report, actually we have Sergeant Russ Nesbitt who's now building these, so it was a bit of a learning curve while he was working with it and capturing stats and so on and so forth. So it's a living document, if you will, and every month as we go into the second year of the contract, we'll obviously have those comparison numbers where we can look at year over year. So again, when you're looking at some of these numbers, as in the past, they're skewed towards an increase where it may not necessarily be the case just because the previous numbers are reflected as a zero. So the detachment initiatives on the next page there, you can see with regards to targeted media releases, 8 media releases pertaining to Wingham placed on the media portal. Obviously those media releases are put out in an attempt to educate, to create awareness, and emphasize the need for public's help in solving crimes. So I know you're getting those messages, and there'll be a couple I speak to near the end of this report. So crime and traffic campaigns and initiatives. You'll see there were 6 collisions in Wingham in December, all 6 being property crimes, so no personal injury collisions. The Festive Ride campaign began on the 23rd of November and ran until January 2nd. During its run, we had conducted 14 ride programs locally in Wingham, resulting in 1 over 80 charge, obviously alcohol related. 2 people were charged with cannabis readily available during the month. So, and I have mentioned that at other boards that obviously when we're out conducting rides, we're not just looking for alcohol, but we are encountering cannabis in the vehicles, and we are conducting tests with regards to that as well. So,
And just on that as well, again, from a county perspective, which would include just outside the town of Wingham, when you compare the efforts of the Huron County officers, we were very much leaders within the region for the number of ride campaigns, and certainly in some areas of enforcement, but that's all relative to the vehicles that you stop. You don't want to get any impaireds. That's the ultimate goal, but you don't want to miss them either. So I think there was some great effort when you look at the overall. I can't speak to that in relation to our regional perspective.
Moving forward with public education campaigns, again through the media, releases issued in the past month pertaining to county-wide information and or public education campaigns. This one that we've added here as well, Crime Stoppers, 14 new tips received for Huron County OPP, 4 being drug-related and 10 intelligence-related. Obviously, we don't want to narrow down the scope of that beyond, because those are Crime Stoppers tips, so information that we're working on. Another one here to add, continuous learning for our members. So this will be on a month-to-month basis. You can see a breakdown of what our members are engaged with. Mental health first aid training is the title of the course for our members. 2 officers on that training during the month. Supervisors training, Sergeant Chris Arnold just completed the first leg of the supervisors training. Once you're promoted into a position, there's standards that come with that and levels of training that you must complete. So he just completed that last month. SFST, Standard Field Sobriety Test Training. 1 officer completed that for the month. So that's basically your roadside. Things have become really standardized when it comes to that, and the tests that are conducted. So all members are doing them the same way, and they're looking for the same things. So then you can qualify your results and what you actually saw at the roadside. So. Drug screening device training, 1 officer on that. That training was actually in Ottawa, and that's with regards to the roadside screening device not unlike what we use at this current time for alcohol. This one is for cannabis. It has the capabilities moving forward when things are approved to look for other drugs as well. Looking at cocaine and whatever other drug that might be integrated into the system. But we did have one member go to Ottawa for that, so I'm hoping that with his newfound knowledge, we'll be able to get our members trained a little more quickly than maybe other detachments that don't have a member that is at that level of education with that device. And CSCU is our Community Street Crime Unit, one member on training during the month for that program as well. So moving into community engagement, school youth officer report calls for service. We did not have any reported incidents at the school at FE Medill for the course of the month. Again, a shortened month leading up into Christmas, and sometimes I don't want to use the Q word, but sometimes a little more quiet than other times. But in this case, that was it. Community mobilization officer PC Joanna Van Mierlo continues to attend the weekly situation table in Seaforth. Work closely with agencies to assist members of the public. So basically that's bringing everybody to the table where depending on the situation, it has to meet certain levels that can be brought forth to the table to seek assistance from different agencies. So if we have an individual that meets the threshold and the criteria, that we can start engaging other groups. And a lot of the times, from my experience at the table, is a lot of these other agencies have had experience with these individuals, and to bring everybody together for a unified approach really helps. So, one mental health call for service in Wingham in December, down from 6 in November. Again, we are looking at these very closely as well, and depending on the nature of the call for service, is it simply a mental health call for service, or is something behind it? We're getting a lot of calls with certain individuals where mischiefs are engaged, or committed, I should say, or disturb the peace. Is it a mental health call? Not necessarily all the time. So we're trying to make sure that our members are scoring those appropriately as well, so we get a true picture of what we're dealing with.
And just on that, I believe I spoke of our mobile crisis person that's out now actively engaged in Huron County. It has started with PC Van Mierlo, and we're starting to see some good results. Although he is spread very thin, but we're starting to look at the engagements with the agencies in Huron County, as we have in Perth and in the city of Stratford, which the Huron Perth Health Alliance, a lot of things are linked through that way. So there's been some, he's been of great assistance on certainly some of our individuals that find themselves in homeless, a state of crisis, very often in addiction, and provide some good guidance for us and our frontline officers. So moving forward, I see that hopefully improve, and certainly it'd be nice in the future to have in addition to that team, as far as a mobile crisis working with officers. There certainly is the work for it, that's for sure.
Looking at the next title there, Focus Patrol Initiatives. Unfortunately, it wasn't captured in this report, but I do have a response back with their Focus Patrol that was conducted with regards to the school and the area surrounding the school. There was a complaint about the traffic in that area. So we had various members that conducted, and as the inspector said, it doesn't sound like, when I say 13 hours, if you look, that's a shift for a member, but we're looking at focus times for specific infractions. So if there's an hour in the morning and an hour in the evening, right? So you're looking at 6 or 7 days by the time this is calculated. But 4 offense notices issued for various Highway Traffic Act offenses during that time. I think visibility alone goes a long way, so the public sees us in that area, and then the light goes off and says, I've got to, they're here. I've got to maintain my speed. I've got to watch my stop, so on and so forth. So we encourage that if there's any further complaints or action, that we get notified of that, because then we can address it through a focus patrol as well.
Dave, were those focus patrols more at the new four intersection stop on Carling Terrace and Victoria? Or is it down by the Sacred Heart School where it just has the crosswalk there?
Yeah, so this was set up in the area of Carling Terrace, and it's Corinne.
That's the Sacred Heart. That's the
Okay.
Sacred Heart School, which we
Yeah.
had the issue with, where
Yeah.
the Sarah Wickens, I believe, is the lady that had talked to council during the time, and she had called earlier in a previous issue with that particular instance. So
Absolutely.
that's good to see that there was some notice there, and
And our members actually reached out to her directly as well,
great.
so that they can have their chance to provide us with the details.
On
so
specific times when she sees
Exactly.
it, and because she's walking there all the time, and that kind of
Absolutely.
stuff.
So we engaged the complainant just to get the fulsome details,
Yep.
and then we can set up that focus patrol in the dates and time that are most appropriate. Because likewise, and when we talk about a focus patrol and not necessarily a school, but somebody's complaining about a speeder. Well, you can tell me about a speeder on any given roadway, but if it's a certain day of the week, it's a certain time of the day, and we're not there then we're not meeting what we need. So, and that's why we go and get the details and make sure that we do that follow up, so we can get the members there when they need to be there. Another thing, while we're speaking about focus patrols, and it's not actually within this report, but there's another ongoing focus patrol now. I know we've been hit, so to speak, with break and enters in the north end. There have been some problems in Goderich as well. But on a good note, a very good note, some very good work from our frontline members, including our community street crime unit. So you probably saw in the press release that came out, dated the 10th, so 4 days ago now, that we did execute a warrant here in Wingham, and charges were laid against a male party from Wingham with quite a few offenses. And there was, as a result, we did recover some laptops, other items, and in speaking to this individual, we determined that this accused was connected to 4 separate break and enters, all to have taken place in the town of Wingham over the last few weeks. We're still active working with this. Our members are still active here, looking for signs and indicators of people that might, they're not where they should be at any given hour, and we're following up with those. So, like I said, Community Street Crime Unit did an excellent job with that, and intelligence gathering from our frontline members as well. So successful. Likewise, I spoke earlier today at the Goderich PSB meeting. Not only were we seizing and recovering stolen property, but we're also looking at drugs as well. So tend to go hand in hand. In this case, all the charges are with reference to the break-and enters, possession of stolen property, break-in instruments. Like I said, those focus patrols are ongoing, and when we do have a situation that warrants, we'll put the resources where we need to put them at the appropriate times. So, just moving to the next page then. Community events, and again, going through our format, you can see this addresses the Santa Claus Parade held at the end of November. Again, with the assistance of officers, auxiliary members, usually across the board, assist with those as well. Noteworthy occurrences, and this is where we basically pare down some of those information releases that come out, but some of the key points. While on patrol, officer observed vehicle noted to have been in several pursuits, parked in a laneway. The plates turned out to be stolen. Vehicle was towed and one party charged. Again, several break and enters recently in Wingham. Video was viewed and suspect identified and charged. So, looking forward, again, these trends, like I had mentioned earlier, the information is only as good as the stats that are in there, and being that we're just approaching the end of the first year of the new contract, so they're a little bit skewed, but For the year of 2019, number of assault incidents for Wingham stood at 24, up from 7 during the same time frame, and you can see the disclaimer there with where the stats are coming from, our organization versus the Wingham PS stats collection organization. So 2019 thefts 56, up from 16 same time in 2018, and for 2019 number of mental health calls for service in Wingham at 23, and those are showing a decrease from 37 the same time in 2018. Again, and that can be with regards to how that information is scored once it's collected and if it's scored back to mental health or not.
Yeah, and just in addition, as we progress, get more data, we'll be able to kind of mine down a little bit where we can sort of then determine, are we on an upwards trend, downwards trend? We're probably not there. It usually takes about 5 years to get to something somewhat resembling that. So until we get all our own data, but this is certainly what our end game is to try and achieve. So to give you a sense of that.
And on that note, what we would utilize is our analyst to build a data collection tool which would reference everything from the year over year, so then they can look at those trends and we can speak to them at these meetings. The next heading is detachment pressures, and you can look across the board with our current vacancies. Our what block training is the annual training. Every member needs to go for a 1 week training every year to maintain all of their use of force and current in laws and changes. Other trainings, as I had spoke about earlier, annual leaves. Some of the pressures also resulting from retirements, transfers, developmental opportunities where a member might be working outside a detachment at an acting role, different leaves and various workplace accommodations. Not unlike a regular business where your employees, there's a wide gamut across. We also deal with the same things. So.
And just to speak to that a little bit, as you've probably seen, we've had quite a high turnover of officers, so there's a lot of officers that are younger, that are in that family planning, those things, so that certainly is a pressure that not here, everywhere is feeling for those type of leaves. And when you kind of speak to accommodations, I can say that Dave's done a really good job. We really don't have, knock on wood, very much of a problem in relation to accommodated members in relation to the staffing pressures. Those members that are off, Dave's works with them in our HR to get them back to full assigned duties or to the best duties that they can, given whatever the situation they find themselves in. So.
Community pressures, getting the message out to locked vehicles and other property, that's an ongoing thing that I think we probably speak about at every meeting. Increased collisions due to storms. With the change in the weather, it seems like it's always the first snowfall that we always fear, and it seems like in a winter like this we get about 5 or 6 first snowfalls. So it's unfortunate, but it is reality. With more snow forecast for the weekend, hopefully we have people that drive to the condition as well. So a couple of the things that are in the report are more of a year-end wrap-up as well. Namely on the second page of on the second side of the next page, the icon data. But the collision reporting system report that you see here, this is actually location code 6 Golf 20. So it's the north end. It's not just Wingham. So don't fret when you see the numbers that you're seeing. That this shows for 2019 69 collisions, or six actually for the month, which is in line with what I told you earlier, but some of these numbers are still reflecting the whole umbrella and not just locally. So the next page, icon data for Huron County. This is our charge stats, and this is just a good piece of information, just kind of as a year wrap up. But you're looking across the board here, there's 2018 versus 2019 on the left side of your chart. And then you're looking at offense totals for Highway Traffic Act, and then you're looking at Criminal Code Traffic, non-criminal code traffic, Liquor License Act and other charges, and then provincial statutes. So it's just giving a number to how many offense notices have been laid. So that's not something that you would see in a regular report. Moving on to the next page, again, your clearance, your violent crime rates, and most notably probably looking at your year-to-date, your numbers for 2019 is the most accurate out of that entire chart given the contract years. So your assault sitting at 16 for the year, sexual assault is at 4, other crimes against person at 1. Again, I spoke to this in the past, the abduction classification, and that's when it falls under, it's not that we've had somebody abducted, but the way it's scored when we've had previous, and it hasn't just been in Wingham, but we've had reports of individuals speaking to, say, kids at the side of the road, and then it's a classification that gets captured, so, and that's obviously sitting at 1, so. Property crimes for the year, if you're gonna look at that column again, 2019, theft under sitting at 42. What else do we have? Frauds at 16, mischief at 31. And then drug crime, possession and trafficking both sitting at 4 for 2019, year to date to December. And then your clearance rates, and again, I've spoken to this in the past, and I've spoken to other boards with regards to this. And a perfect example is here where we've arrested one individual, and we're looking at 4 to 5 different break and enters that have been cleared. To speak further to that, we've actually got evidence of further entries that were made, but given the nature of the locations that were entered, we're still waiting on the actual people that own those locations to be able to give us more detail on what might have been taken, if anything, out of those locations. So technically they're not cleared until we can get that information. So some of these being seasonal homes. So and then I won't, the criminal records vulnerable checks, obviously what they are there. I won't go into detail with those.
So really, I can do this, Dave.
Sure.
Realistically, you have your billing summary for basically the year. So this is still a very alive and active number until the data is reconciled, but certainly around the 3,480 dedicated billable hours based on calls for service in 2019. So that's kind of where they would be looking at for the year, given the fact that it wasn't even a full complete year. And then at the other page. Again, I've spoken to this last time. Certainly the obligated duty hours for Wingham in December were 616 and a quarter hours for a total of, again, based on when the report was pulled, 4,934 obligated duty hours in Wingham. When you look at that, the township of North Huron, they had 2,411 obligated duty hours, and when you combine both, it'd be 7,345 hours on the year, and certainly for Wingham in total for the year, you'd probably be looking at around 1,015 calls for service. That's certainly still that's based on when the report was printed. So. That's the report.
Mm-hmm. Is there any questions for the inspector or about the report?
Thorough report.
And I think it's a very good report, and you'll see that as we get the stats to be able to compare and reflect on year over year, that it's an excellent comparison and a very good snapshot month to month. Some very good headings.
So that'll really start to happen in the next few months, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once we get into the
Exactly.
second year.
Yeah, and one of the
Okay.
things we'll do is there's certainly an education piece to our sergeants that, here's some expectations that are coming from you know, the municipality, like our communities that we serve, and, you know, how that transcends amongst all the other things that we do. So I know my experience with this, has been relatively positive. I hope it is here as well. I hope it's, gives a little more clarity as to, based on the way we have to extract data from our system. Sometimes it's like the collisions, it'd be all for the north, and that's sometimes problematic. That's why we thought in the captions we drive down, you actually have 6, but this is the other stuff going on. So it kind of gives a sense of operational pressures as well. And then we look at, you know, some of the trends, we'll start commenting in there on the provincial initiatives. For those, until we get an e-ticket, we can't really drive down how many charges we have per area, but I'm not a big proponent in the whole charge game. I'm certainly a proponent of enforcement and targeted enforcement where appropriate. But certainly there's been a shift over many years, and I've talked about this, is that, you know, to determine the quality of your policing service based on the number of provincial offenses charges you lay is not effective use of police time. It's not certainly an effective relationship building with your partners and your community people. Yes, people get tickets. Yes, they do get upset. All these things, because usually that's the only interaction those people have ever had with the police. So, and quite frankly, it's usually the person that calls us that gets a ticket. It's just the way it works. And it's through no mindset of ours or desire. It's just Murphy's Law. So, certainly, you know, we want the tickets to be effective, impactful, like when you take that enforcement component and you combine that with a focused patrol in a targeted area that certainly has some impact and concern for the municipality, you combine that with education, that's the outcome that you want. Certainly, yes, we need to go and target enforcement like we do with ride and speeding and all those things, that is part of our daily routine, but there certainly is quite a shift in culture that way. So.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the calls, because the calls for service documentation that you had here versus the obligated duty hours. Obviously, the obligated duty hours are going to have extra hours in it that are not calls for service. Is that? I just want to make sure that's
Well,
clear.
your call for service will be you have an assault, and you have a theft, and your obligated duty hours will be what's scored to that. So you could have 100 hours for the assault and 3 hours for the theft. It'd be 103 hours.
Right.
So that's the difference. So the obligated duty hours are representative of how much time's been put into the calls for service.
Right. So I'm trying to and maybe there isn't a connection between the two reports, and that's
No.
and that's why I just want to make sure for
Right.
people who are, you know, not here and
Right.
don't necessarily understand that they shouldn't see
Right.
that, the year-to-date report for 2019 would say 740 hours calls for service, but that's not going to equate, or even the 3480 on that report for that
Right.
isn't going to report on that next page where it says the obligated duty hours.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that people understand that there's not a correlation between those two reports,
Right,
because
and
if
then-
there
and then
were,
many calls for service, there aren't that are not billable calls for service as well,
right,
that aren't billed. So like I explained before, there's calls for service now that are being rendered, like 911 calls and pocket dials and things, that will go through the comm centers now going through those processes where officers won't get dispatched like they once did. Always err on the side of public safety, and we have, but that then results in a non-billable call to the municipality,
Right.
which have been very problematic everywhere in the past. And so, yeah, it's like to land on these numbers, it's a very complex formula that the municipal policing uses based on a lot of variables, and it's certainly designed to err on the side of the municipality, not to bolster it. There's a lot of hours taken out that they're not billed for, and then again, you can't, because as an organization, we've gotten away, as I said before, from the full-time equivalent, measuring everything on obligated duty hours. That doesn't go on in our other municipalities because we don't do that. Here, because it's a transitional contract, it at least gives you a sense of the service,
Yeah.
although it's not a perfect system.
Okay,
And for example, there was on that last investigation, I'm not sure if we had forensic ident here, but that's included. We've got street crime members from, I know from Perth were here. Our members, there might have been some from South Bruce as well to help execute warrants. Our ERT members were here. So that all came with that package, right?
Yeah.
So, and then behind the scenes, you have intelligence, you have analysts and all those things working to support those teams as well, so.
yep, absolutely. Jim, did you have a question?
I was just gonna mention, so the calls for service at 139 is quite a bit more in December than it's been all year long, right? Usually 80, 90?
It's been about
Sometimes
90-ish,
100,
yeah.
So that's- So is that capturing a little bit more with this report, or?
Well, no, it's just, I think it
Just the way the month
gives a
was.
little clearer, and keep in mind too, when you look at things like focus patrols, ride programs, all these things, those are proactive calls for service. That's why we developed, I should say myself and other members, to try and measure the proactive efforts that we're doing, to give a sense, because we don't report certain things, right? If we say, here's your calls for service, okay, but how much are proactive? The things that you're getting on that first sheet here, under the community safety and mobilization hours, and it gives you a sense, right? So you know, like Dave explained, when you're doing a focus patrol, it may say, 10 hours, but that could be for a week and a half an hour each with the school, and then 4 or 5 charges. There might have been, and it's very difficult for us to do it, but there may have been a couple traffic stops that kind of did a public education piece in there too. You don't know, and that's really getting to the weeds on these things, right? So, well, we can rest assured there was officers there was visibility there, there was communication with the complainant, and all those things moving forward.
Would that sort of thing be taken into account in the call for service number then?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so that,
Okay,
and
so that's showing a little
that's the
more-
thing, is that
Yeah.
that one focus patrol was one call for service spanned over a week or two or whatever
Okay.
it may be. Every ride program that we do is a call for service, but it's proactive as opposed to reactive, which would be going to investigate those break and enters.
Right.
So now when we do the focus patrol on the hinge of that, or sometimes we will do them if we don't, even if the street crime's not involved, we'll take that proactive effort, like, there's been times where we've had information of bank robberies or various things, so we've done a focus patrol, and officers have gone and talked to people in the bank, they've patrolled around the bank areas. Really, the general public doesn't know that, but that's what we're doing, so, but when it comes to reporting, we could then report on, we had information in relation to possible bank robberies in and around, the county, but we went in and had those conversations, so, the education component with the people in the bank, be extra vigilant, and our officers are kind of a little more vigilant themselves when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly a great point in the sense that, yeah, it's 113 calls for service. It's not 113 break-ins.
That's right.
or 113 other, like it's
Right.
it's a difference of stuff that's being proactive versus the stuff that you have to
Yeah.
go to because somebody calls you for an actual service,
Right.
dog bite or whatever the case may be. So
Right, and quite often the reactive calls certainly outweigh the proactive efforts, because the reactive calls often take that time away from,
Yeah.
and especially when you start looking at, like we've always said, like the mental health type related calls that tie officers up, that take you away from doing other proactive efforts.
Yep.
And sometimes reactive efforts as well.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I take a motion to accept and approve the detachment commander's report from January 14th. Jim will move this one, and Rick will second. All those in favor? Carried. The financial report, so this is the bills and accounts as well for December and January, up to I believe it is up to January the 10th. Effectively moving basically after December, the only expenses that this board will have to deal with are very little, if any. But you're still gonna have to accept the bills and accounts, which will be the utilities for the old wing of police building until council decides what they're going to do with that structure. Carson?
Just through you, Chair. So we can probably expect there might be one more financial report that would cover any invoices we receive up until January 24th. So January 24th is when we're closing that fiscal period. So what with the board, what is likely to be expected is there might be one more hydro expense. There might be one more water billing. But just if those late billings occur.
Yep.
The hydro tends to have a delay in their billing cycle. But as Chair Sepp indicated, beyond that, there wouldn't be a finance report. So that budget is, it's not being incorporated as a police,
Council will now take that budget and they will make the budget and they will approve any expenditures as it relates to the budget during their normal course of action during council meetings. So that would be, so the only other thing, that, and this might be a good place to even add to this is, the conversation about the, so what the intention of this board is to go to conferences. The previous board had a number in the budget to go to conferences, which would be the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. So there's an annual conference in Toronto in May. I think I don't know if all of Jim, yourself, or Rick, you've received, there is actual is a day, I don't know if it's a day training or it's a half a day training of police services board training that I know Dwayne Sprague has done in the past when there's new police board members get assigned. If that hasn't happened yet, you probably would, I can talk to Dwayne about getting that, so we could probably put that into the budget. But I guess the question I have from the board is there an intention or is there a thought possibility that you may want to go to something like that? Because if there is, even if it's a slight chance, we would rather have it in the budget than not. Because if we don't, because what I will tell you is if it's not in the budget, chances are you will not be going. So that doesn't take into consideration the Zone 5 meetings. Like Zone 5 meetings, if you go, that's included in the board the board training is on its own. I'm more looking at the council stuff. I know we don't think we had anybody go to a Zone 5 this year at all.
and through you, Chair. So in 2019, we had budgeted for the ability for board members to go to zone meetings, to go to conferences, and there wasn't that uptake. So the question from the Director of Finance is, what is the intention of the board this year? Are the board members planning to go to these kind of things? Because if they are, then we'll have to incorporate that as part of the policing budget.
And if I may, they're usually, the next one's in Owen Sound, usually Waterloo hosts, there's usually an OPP area that hosts, and Orangeville used to, so I don't know how that will be with the change. They were always pretty standard, just to give you a sense of where they are.
That's where they
And
are.
I know that Central Huron, which is close, which I encourage you to go to, I think they're gonna see if they can host, perhaps in the fall, once the new detachment is open. So that's my general understanding, but they've usually been to Owen Sound, Waterloo, so that gives you a sense. So again, pardon the interruption there, but I just thought I'd
No, That's exactly correct. They've always been the standard. Owen Sound is in March, Waterloo is in June-ish, and then you've got, usually it's, like you said, an OPP one, which is usually in September, and then the Orangeville one, they do in December. Orangeville always does in December because of the Christmas thing, I think there's something to do with that, so that is the intention. I know we have, it's, like I said, for the board in the past, it's very difficult for me, obviously with a full-time job, and I'm not sure you, Jim, as well as Rick, I know we're all busy, so it is very, but it is a 9 till usually a 2. If you leave at 8 in the morning, you're usually back in the municipality by 2 o'clock that day. So if there's any, so what I would ask the board is to leave tonight, and if there is a thought, if they could send me, the chair, a message about if they are anticipating going anything. If I don't hear anything by next Friday, I will assume that the board is not anticipating on going to any of these things, and then I will take into consideration what I think I'm potentially going to go to, and then we'll put those in the budgets, and then let the treasurer have that for board for council approval. So, does that seem fair?
Good.
Okay. So, so is there any questions as it relates to any of the bills and accounts that are here? So if there's not, I would take a motion for the board hereby authorize and approve the payment in a total of $4,861.85 from the period of December the 12th to January 10th as presented. Rick moves that and Jim seconds it. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, other. So this has been talked about once or twice, but I will, it's a possibility of the scheduling of the 2020 police board meetings. So we have had monthly meetings before, and have had monthly meetings forever. I will ask Carson to talk to this report that he has presented for the possibility of agreeing to switch those meetings to a quarterly function, just for the sake of, we would still get the monthly report, but we would only have this meeting once a quarter. So go ahead, Carson.
Thank you, Chair. So the purpose of this report is under North Huron's Police Services Board Procedure Bylaw. We are required to establish a schedule of the meetings for the year and then post that on the township website. So under the Police Services Act, and then also reflected in our procedure bylaw, the only requirement is that the police board meet 4 times per year. And then if the board wanted to call additional meetings, they have the ability to do so. So given the fact that the board's nearly a year into the transition to the OPP, the board may consider reducing the frequency of their meetings. As Chair Stipe has indicated, the finance report is likely going to be no longer on the agenda in future meetings, so as a result, the agenda would largely consist of the detachment commander report and then any other correspondence, if any. In addition to this, the board is down 2 provincial appointees, and there is no direction from the minister's office whether those would be filled anytime soon. So in order for the board to continue to have meetings, a quorum of all 3 members who are present tonight is required. So knowing this, it might be prudent to reduce the frequency of meetings as well. Staff's recommendation would be that meetings are held in March, June, September, and December. And the reasoning for this is the Police Services Board procedure bylaw says that no meetings can be held in July and August. So if meetings are held quarterly in March, June, September, and December, then there's never more than a gap of 2 months between meetings, and then also the procedure bylaw is not required to be amended. With this proposed schedule, the meetings would still occur at 7 p.m. on the third Tuesday of the month, just like the board has been proceeding. And then anytime something arose, the board has the ability to call a special meeting whenever it's required. All that requires is the majority of members of the board. So based on this recommendation, that would result in a schedule of 2020 meetings being March 17th, June 16th, September 15th, and December 15th. And then if it's found that this schedule works well, then at the December meeting of each year, the board would be able to adopt a similar schedule for the next year as well. The other piece to that report is the financial impact. So as board members will be aware, there's a flat rate for attending the meetings, and as the meetings have become much shorter, this would result in significant savings for the township. And so, any thoughts on that or
Is
questions?
there any thoughts or comments on that?
I like the schedule. Works out with my Legion schedule.
The revised one,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Is there any comments from the OPP or the attachment manager?
No, I think that's fine. You still want a report to be filed monthly?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think the reason for that is at least then council would see the report and see information, and if council so choose that they want to request that I call a board meeting for whatever reason, then I
Yeah,
can
that's
talk to Jim to whether we get a board meeting together to have a discussion or not. I think I did make it very clear to the board or to council last night that they were going to see monthly meetings or monthly reports from the board, which would be just these reports, and they would not be buried in the correspondence, or so that they are physically going to have to make, they're going to have to look at it and actually make a motion to accept it or whatever, so that they can be upfront and make sure that they are getting the information that they want in order to make decisions on the future of the contract or whatever the case may be when it comes to that time for that decision to happen.
And I would suggest that the reports then, if that's the case, barring our dates, that they're probably pushed till at least the 15th or 17th area, because that's usually when our data is uploaded, Dave.
Yeah,
That's correct. So,
yeah, and
So
we
for the
have a
report
meeting.
on-
We usually generally have a meeting in the first Monday and the third Monday. So, if your report if you ran your report and it didn't come out till we ran the first meeting of the next month, that I don't see that being a grave concern or an issue from a reporting perspective.
Yeah, Dave.
Yep.
Carson can work on that.
Absolutely.
Through you, Chair. So, when we publish the second meeting we have each month, when we publish that, we publish it the same day as when we publish the police board reports too. So, it would be a similar system to what we would have now.
Sure.
Okay. So if there's no issues with this schedule, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't switch.
I guess I would just ask, still being so new into the OPP contract, why would, do we not feel there's any need to have a monthly contact, or what's the point of even continuing on with the police services board then, if the fact that the monthly the council gets the reports and accepts the report anyway?
Because you don't have a choice.
So
You don't have a choice not to have a police services board.
yeah.
That's
So I mean,
To be
at
quite
the end
honest
of
with
the
you,
day,
that's
then that's kind of where we're
one
coming
of the
to.
one of
is-
the reasons is we have to have the police services board because of the contract, and there is at this point no obligation not to. The concern is that the board really doesn't have the board has a direct line, in essence, the direct line to the detachment commander. So, the council doesn't have that option. Now they can contact Rob and say come to a council meeting, but we already have these scheduled. The argument would be is, a lot of this time is by the time we finish this meeting, in my mind, I'm not gonna skirt around the issue. Dave and them are going back and start the next report for the next meeting.
Yeah.
In all honesty, so, if I personally think what what the board needs to get understanding is what their role in this arrangement is.
Mm.
It used to be it used to be more than a governance model. It used to be you were providing direction to the chief. The chief was doing what you asked the chief to do based on policies and procedures, and you actually had to monitor the budget. Well, none of that now happens.
Mhm.
So the role of this board has diminished significantly from what it has been in the past 100 years when the police service was here.
Mhm. Well,
So
you're not operating a police service.
we're not
anymore,
operating a
but,
police
yeah.
service anymore. We're basically having a contract, and ultimately, and to be quite honest, the police services board has no bearing on that contract whatsoever. Like we can't take the contract out or anything. We can't even recommend it. It's not our contract. The council signed the contract. What the intention is that we're a direct line to residents. Therefore, is a direct line to the police services board, which is a direct line to the OPP that can say, if you've got an issue, we can talk about it at any point, or any issue, or any discussion. It's much harder to get a council meeting because of the and inspector and all that stuff to be there in the middle of on those times, because obviously there's council meetings and other police board meetings that are already scheduled. So I agree with you. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think from a sense of the information necessarily, I don't know that the council is, like, the council's got these reports now,
Mhm.
and I will tell you the discussion at council about them, there has not been a word at all about them. So I think, like anything else, council is going to look to the police services board to provide updates and highlights to these discussions that we're going to take to council, myself, or things like you might have that me and Rick aren't seeing, and we highlight it to council so that they can make a judgment on what the discussion is going forward. Because at the end of the day, that's the arrangement. This is basically a committee of council in essence. Two separate responsibilities, but we don't report to council. We are our own obligated, but we are recommending stuff to council, and because there's two council members, it just happens to be that case. Normal police boards wouldn't have two members of council on them. They'd have maybe one, if any. So I completely agree with you, Jim. It's just the nature of where we're at,
Mhm.
and I don't know that we're gaining anything, and especially once a month, if all of it's us three, if any of us get sick, we're not having a meeting anyways, right? So
That's been problematic elsewhere where there's been issues with the provincial appointee, someone hasn't been there, it's just a report received, and that's it. And that's
so
the
you're here
same
for
thing
15
beyond-
minutes.
Right. I think when you look, if you don't mind, I know it's not my place to weigh in, but if you look at, the calls for service that we've seen and some of that, you really want to get a good sense of a picture, and since we're missing a lot of data from what's historically been here, and, in fairness to the past municipal police service, I'm sure they collected things a little differently based on the expectations that were presented to them. And we do the same thing, but we've got a provincial influence and then a local influence, and we try to combine to satisfy those expectations. So I think by a quarterly, you may get a better sense of, okay, what's really gone on in this period of time, and then as we move forward, a lot of what we're doing is we're identifying, and I can tell you this, is that we break our year up into quarterly. We have our analysts do this, and he actually goes through a variety of what you see here: property-related crimes, violent crimes, and that. And we'll look to, okay, what's our priority in the quarter based on historical data, and so it may be that quarter is fraud, and we'll look to fraud and do education campaigns, and it may be property crime. Rural property crime, so we've done targeted education and enforcement, focused on all these things in rural crimes, and we've attended, the Port Congress, all these various components. So the next quarter we'll look at, like, we can't attack everything. And through the analysis, it'll highlight what has been problematic in it from a trend perspective that we can almost expect will happen. You can almost expect every time, when school gets out, your trouble with youth, perhaps some of these things will increase in the summer. In the wintertime, your collisions are gonna go up. You got all these things that we all know, but then sometimes there are some anomalies. So that would tie in a little bit with how we're gonna move forward and continue to do that and serve the community with everything we've discussed here. But the quarterly report may give you a little more, might be a little more fulsome than say we've had 2 break-ins or something. You know what I mean?
Mhm,
So,
I guess,
anyways, we'll do it. We're at the discretion of the board, and we'll tend to do whatever you like.
I guess just my thought is, this is still brand new, it's 1 year in. We don't even have year-over-year comparisons or anything. And I don't know, like, I'm not really out to make more meetings or continue meetings if they're not necessary. But stepping back from the whole thing just seems to me, it's like, what's the point? Even 3 months? Like, if the council's gonna accept this stuff, and like, I guess I'm just saying, if we don't need a monthly kind of a sit down to discuss what's going on in the community, how the new OPP contract is affecting people or the area. It's just, to me, it's like, if we were 5 years in or something, I guess I could kind of understand it a little more. A year and I'm just kind of doing that seems weird to me, but.
Carson?
Through your chair. So the one thing I would point out there is, so the board has the ability to call special meetings, right?
Right.
So if there were circumstances like that, it's not like a meeting could not be held and you have to wait till the next quarter, right?
Yeah, no, I see that. I mean, but you may be 3 months past something before anybody even really knows, I guess is kind of the communication just tends to be a little bit further stretched out. I don't know. Just kind
Well,
of.
I think the one thing I think we have to understand is the communication between the OPP and us is going to continue
Mhm.
via press releases. The press releases will happen, the monthly reports will happen. My expectation is that the Police Services Board will continue to read those reports as they come out, and if any Police Service Board member feels the urge that they think we need to have a discussion based on the trend they see or some issue that they think has been in the municipality and they aren't thinking that we're being addressed, they can call me and we can sit, and all I have to do is call you through two and say, do we need a meeting? And if you guys tell me yes, then we'll call a meeting and we'll call it and we'll make sure the inspector and them are available. Like I guess my question is that we can come here and do this, and ultimately, have the hour discussion. But my question is, are we going to be and based on the information that we're getting every month, are we going to be worse off if we get it quarterly? I don't know, and the argument could be there's nothing saying we can't try it, and then in 4 meetings, if we still believe that we're not getting the information or we think we need more, maybe we change it from 4 to 6. Whatever the case may be, I think we're in an opportunity where we can play around with the meetings to figure out what is going to be in the ideal best practice for us, based on the situation we have, but also figure out, are we worse off in information? Because I don't know. I only know because based on what I've known is I've only known a meeting every month.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also had a chief, if I have a question, I can go to his door and knock on his door, right? So it's a little different scenario that we got here. Rick, do you have any thoughts?
But I think it's fine, like quarterly too.
Okay, so
We're good, whatever you need.
so we'll take.
Yeah, I mean, no.
No.
I don't think it's any disrespect, Jim. I think
No,
you're
no.
asking a great question. I
Yeah.
think the ultimate thing is we can play around with the meetings and see where we land.
Mhm.
And if we're going from 12 to 4. We're going from 10 to 4. If 4 doesn't look like the number come next December and 10 was too many,
Well,
Well-
if I may,
yeah,
much to my only one thing great to be four. But if you, you know, if you'd like to, from this day forward, try it every 2 months, and then see where you go from there, even into the end of the year. Some of my boards that I sit on, we do them quarterly. I sit on them that are every 2 months, sit on them that are every week. So if that would give a bit of comfort to the board members to try it, I'm certainly would entertain that. I'll do whatever you, David, I'll do whatever you like. But it's your decision, it's not
Yep.
up to me. So, again, the every 2 months versus every quarter, it doesn't matter to us. We're always available. We have, you know, Dave and I, our emails are there, our cell phones, and we'll do that. So, certainly there's advantages to all, but there certainly is a necessity for efficiency though too.
Yeah, so in essence, in this particular year, we'd 5, because we're meeting tonight. So there'll be 5 meetings in the year tonight. So,
You can be rest assured that if there's a significant event that were to be experienced in Wingham, certainly my expectation
you'll be having a meeting.
would be that I should be called to a meeting, and I would almost be on the phone, probably, or Dave, to say, I think we should have a meeting, just so that everyone's informed
Yes.
and go forward that way. Like if there's some significant pressing issue that's, you know, certainly media worthy or anything like that.
Sure.
So, and that doesn't have to be on a regular date, I think so. So, I'll leave that. We're very flexible and open, and we're,
Well, we appreciate that.
Okay.
so,
So at this point, what I'll do, like I said, we've got a recommendation here. I'm gonna put so that
That should say the board.
yeah. So the Police Services Board of North Huron hereby receives the report for the recording secretary dated January 14th regarding the schedule for the 2020 Police Services Board meetings for information purposes. And further that the North Huron Police Services Board agree to meet on the dates of March 17th, June 16th, September 15th, December 15th of 2020 at 7 p.m. at in the North Huron Council Chambers. And further that special meetings will be called by the board as required. And further that staff be directed to advertise the 2020 schedule of the North Huron Police Services Board meetings on the township's website. Do I have a mover of that? Rick moves it. Do I have a seconder?
It's tough when you're the only other guy.
don't look at us, we're out on this one. That's not,
I will second. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, and then, so the correspondence, so there is, on, if it wasn't going to be an earth-shattering meeting in March for the OAPSB, there's actually going to be officer elections, for the board of the Zone 5 on in March, so there's some opportunity there. Is there any questions about that correspondence? North Huron Police Services Board hereby directs the correspondence be ordered, read, and filed. Do I have a mover of that? Rick moves that. Jim seconds it. All those in favor? Carried. New business. It's not any new business, but I do have a question actually now that I'm remembering our procedural bylaw. Generally, once a year, at the first meeting in January, they actually elect a chair, that I recall.
Okay.
But obviously, at the end of the day, you know, I'm just remembering the procedural bylaw that we normally do. I don't have an issue with that being happened in March. I don't know that there's anybody else that's gonna wanna take the chair position, so but I think, you know, we can definitely defer that until March, but I thought I would just bring that up to the secretary. I forgot about it until this morning, when I was thinking about it. So I will, just mention that to, the secretary, and we'll work through that discussion, for the next meeting. Okay? No closed, so the next meeting obviously would be March the 17th, I believe.
Yep.
March the 17th at 7 o'clock.
I am.
And if there's no further business, North Huron Police Service Board meeting hereby adjourns at 8:10. Do I have a mover? Jim moves that, and Rick seconds it. All in favor? Carried. Thanks.